Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the OK Center, to the Cyber Arts exhibition, to a very, very special moment of this year's Ars Electronica. For the third time now, the fourth time, we are awarding a Golden Nica to visionary pioneers of media art. I think the reason why we are doing this is pretty obvious. Media art has become the major trend of contemporary art. It is one of the most important, I think, also contributions to how we can develop this technological future for our society in a responsible way. And we have thousands of young artists who are flocking into this area. You might have recognized we have, for example, 23 international universities with their students presenting here at the festival. And many of them think that media art is something, you know, maybe as old as the smartphones, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. And we all know it's, of course, completely the other side around. So we decided to try with this award for visionary pioneers of media art in general to raise the attention of the young generation for their own history and to actively contribute to one thing that is a key feature of the people who get the award this year's intergenerational collaboration and exchange. And I think there is probably nobody else than the whole group, the team, the community of Leonardo that has been so successful in continuously working on this intergenerational dialogue, always being able to introduce new generations than Leonardo and the Leonardo magazine. So Leonardo, not only Roger Malina, I'm sorry to say it like this, get the Golden Nica as a visionary pioneers of media art, but one of the reasons why we thought that they really deserve this prize is not only their 50 years survival, as you perfectly pointed out yesterday, but of course the huge community they were creating and the huge community that stands behind Leonardo and keeps it alive and keeps it relevant. We have two stages now, or two parts of our celebration of our visionary pioneers of Media Art 2018. The first part is here, a presentation by Roger Malina and a laudatio that Derrick de Kerckhove will deliver. Thanks you very much for taking up this challenge. And then afterwards, we are moving downstairs to the exhibition space where the wonderfully curated exhibition that Nina was putting together with Genoveva here from the OK Center, where this exhibition is located, where we are going to do the informal part, the birthday party. There will be birthday cake, birthday greetings, so everything that is necessary to have a nice birthday party. So please follow us also afterwards. And then we have the whole night, because today is the OK night, which means party, concerts, lots of interesting possibilities to meet and exchange here in the OK Center until late in the night or late in the morning. And everything is dedicated to celebrate 50 years of Leonardo. And without any further ado, I would like to ask Derrick de Kerckhove now to present his laudatio. Like. It's totally up to you. Okay.
Well, I've said this before, but for those who didn't hear it, I must say it again. This is my birthday present. I am not born today on the 8th of September, but on the 30th of May, and on the morning, and I could almost show you the message, on the morning of the 30th of May, I received a message from Gerfried saying, would you like to present Roger Malina and Leonardo at Ars Electronica? I can't tell you how I felt. It was so wonderful. I thought, oh, I'm going back to Ars Electronica. It's such a great thing. But also to be able to really be able to say a few words about Leonardo and about my dear friend Roger Malina, who I feel like we were just saying as we got together right now, it's been a long time. When I just said, I immediately thought, well, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like, I know him sort of I wouldn't pretend, but I do feel I'm very close to him. So, yes, those who have a chance to see perhaps the catalog, I entitled my little blurb about Leonardo, coaching the global culture. And you know, the reason I thought that was I suddenly realized the global culture, first of all, is becoming really global, and that's been a while. But on the other hand, it's also breaking apart in many places. And we're very different times now than when, certainly when Leonardo began, or certainly when Ars Electronica began. There's a certain fragility about the globe right now. And certain kind of networks, such as the one created by Leonardo, is putting that, is maintaining cohesion in that global vision, in the global understanding. And so it's very, so there was a time when people were talking about silent majority. There's no such thing. Silent majority belonged to television, just like the global village that McLuhan thought about belonged to television. It was the era where people were actually more or less covered by the same message globally, nationally. But as soon as the internet came on, the silent majority started screaming in minorities. And right now we're dealing with a situation which is, as I said, extremely fragile. And Leonardo seems to be a kind of an adult voice of civilization, because it brings over the whole world. I mean, we know that the celebration of the 50 years has been happening in 25 different places in the world. That shows that the network is really there, present, active. And this is the dimension of that network, that it has a very special voice in the planet. The other thing which I find extremely exciting and interesting about what Leonardo has stood for, think about the fact that it was born around the time when we were celebrating in Europe May '68, right? And you were 18. So what? Demonstrating. So it's a time when boundaries were being broken. Boundaries between disciplines, boundaries between various levels of government, boundaries of social boundaries generally. It was a time of revolution, and I don't know whether, it would be nice to know whether your father was affected by May '68. Do you think he was? Did he hear about it? Americans didn't pay much attention to May '68, I must remember, that as I remember, because I was already in Canada then. And of course, when I was coming back to Europe, there was a lot of excitement around the whole thing, and I'm sure some of you remember it. But nevertheless, I mean, this is it. There was a mood at that time when you could actually rebuild things and reconsider things. And what Leonardo was doing was bridging two cultures. He was bridging the culture of the past. Your father wanted to make this an academic journal. And you pulled it out of the academe up to a point. You didn't pull it out. You actually expanded from the academe, bringing the arts into it. At the time, anything to do with arts and technology, I was involved with it myself. In fact, from not quite so early, but as a director of the McLuhan program, I ran it for 10 years, in fact, 15 years, an artist engineering program. But we were not taken very seriously at the University of Toronto, and the whole relationship, and especially in the art world, nobody could care less about art and technology at the time. So that Leonardo did a very, very big push in that direction of bridging those two cultures, and just following how the culture, the new one, which is coming about, was unfolding. And that was something that is very, very, yesterday, Roger said, we are your elders talking to Ars Electronica. True. And I don't know how much Ars Electronica was at that time immediately inspired by Leonardo, rather how Leonardo was inspired by Ars Electronica. But the fact is, there is so much in common between Ars Electronica and Leonardo in terms of what I was saying before, coaching the global culture. We're all part of an attempt to understand what is happening as it is happening and at the same time having to break many boundaries in order to be able to declare this. But what's wonderful about both Ars Electronica and Leonardo is that as they have pushed forward this bridging of cultures, and as they have evolved and grown immensely, I mean, your network grew enormously, Ars Electronica has grown enormously as well, without ever losing the fundamental character, without losing that extraordinary spirit that is both in Leonardo and in Ars Electronica. So it's no surprise that in the 50th anniversary, it's being celebrated right here. There are two huge networks coming together because they recognize each other's role. And so that's something that I find very, very important and moving, to say the least. Roger is very modest. He's a man of enormous accomplishment, but in every way he sustains and supports and claims the group, the people who have been involved in working with him. In the first article he's in the paper that he wrote, you wrote, the paper that Leonardo wrote, the team of Leonardo wrote about this event and this prize, the first statement is a very surprising and interesting one, saying, why do we always give prize to individuals? We should give prize to groups. We should give prize to communities of practice that actually create change and bring, making the world a better place, so to speak. So that in some ways I praise absolutely your tenacity. The troubles you have gone through, we don't hear anymore about how difficult it has been to have to deal with the legal fight against, what was the company called? It's a toy company that was ripping you off for... Exactly, so that was a big battle that we don't sort of talk about very much. There was a fire who destroyed your archives, which is something... Again, this is the modesty of a man who has been able to overcome enormous difficulties, enormous challenges without making any fuss about it. In fact, if anything, my vision of Roger is a man who keeps his calm and, in fact, is also enjoying any situation he finds himself in. Am I wrong about that? No. Exactly. So, anyway, I just want to... say that I don't know how many people who are direct collaborators in this room at this point, but I certainly know a few, and they will be having a chance, I hope, to talk in the reception after. And so I just want to thank Ars Electronica for the opportunity of having the honor of praising Roger and Leonardo, and I guess I could invite you to follow me.
Okay, let me just explain what I just did. I hugged Derrick. And our first birthday party in Manizales, Colombia, we developed this practice of our community of hugging each other. And the way that I did it is when I'm a physicist, I'm very disciplinary. I don't know how to hug. But when I'm interdisciplinary, I do. So excuse me if I hug you, because the hugging reflects, I think, what we're now calling a network of villages, that you know each other, you keep in touch with each other. Villages don't know how to be private, and so you can leave a village and go to a different village when things get too public. And so it's a real pleasure, obviously, to have this gathering here today. The other thing that I just wanted to emphasize before I go into my slides, you mentioned this comment about intergenerational collaboration. I'm so happy that Herbert Franke is here. When my father died, he was one of the people who said, keep going. And, you know, at the time, I didn't know what I was doing, and people like you, Frank Popper, who turned 100 this year, he still replies to my emails. And so, in a very real sense, there's been a group of people that have kept things going. It's not always been easy. We are a non-profit, and we do not make a profit. Nina, where are you? Nina Zegledy, who's on our board of directors, we had no budget for our 50th anniversary. So she said, well, let's do a birthday party. Everybody can afford a birthday cake. And it turned out to be such a simple and meaningful idea, and I think we've now had 26 birthday parties. We won't get to 50 birthday parties. And as you'll hear, we're now planning our 100th birthday party. So there's something about a community of practice, a community of people who help each other when things are difficult. Derrick and I, when I was in Marseille trying to figure out which way was up, would fly in. You were trying to do things in Cannes or somewhere. And so we were both piloting through different chaoses, but somehow shouldering each other. So I'm just going to run through some slides. How do I? Oh, so the good news is astronomy is really easy. Astronomers have been working together for 100,000 years. We agree that's a planet. We agree that's a star. We still don't agree on the constellations, so it doesn't matter. What happened to my slide? Oh. I don't know what the word is we use to describe what we do. Electronic art was really the word when Ars Electronica was invented. Nobody talks about electronic art anymore. And if you just do a Google search of the words we use to describe ourselves, we can't even agree on what we're doing. And so it's wonderful to have that sense of a community of practice inventing themselves by doing what they do. Just want to acknowledge part of our intergenerational collaboration. Danielle Simbieta is here in the front row. She's now our managing director. And talk about piloting through chaos. She's been working with hundreds of people this year, making the connections, trying to figure out whether we should ignore my recommendation that we close down the organization. And obviously, Danielle was against that idea because she's an employee and she doesn't want to be laid off. But there's nothing worse, and those of you in universities, nothing worse than an institution that reinvents itself just to keep existing as an institution. And so I did recommend to our board of directors that we close down on the organization because we've succeeded. And it's amazing being in the post-city here. It's a whole town. It's not a village. And there are 6-year-olds and 100-year-olds all excited by different things. And so, very different situation. So the next 50 years, and Pierluigi Capucci is here, and when he did a birthday party, he went around giving me 5 words that will be important in 50 years. And anyway, you might all think about that. And I assure you, electronic art won't be one of those words. It will have disappeared from human memory 50 years from now. And Pierluigi did a kind of interesting Rorschach test of a group of people of the 5 words each of them thought would be important in 50 years. So Leonardo has 2 nonprofits. Annick Bureau is here, who's been running the French nonprofit. Really a nonprofit. And Annick has navigated through the complicated office politics of Paris. Paris is probably the city that has the most complicated office politics of anywhere on the planet. But yes, we survive, and we're trying to figure out what to do next. So what these nonprofits have been doing is documenting, advocating, promoting, enabling artists who appropriate science and technology for their own cultural purposes. And that was sort of the initial idea of the group of people in Paris in the 1950s who, as Derrick said, could get no attention from the museum world, never mind the gallery world. And certainly in the 1950s, and obviously we now have a number of people that we remember from the 1950s, but let me tell you, they were starving artists in the 1950s. Also, my father had a mixed background as a research scientist and engineer, but then in 1952, Victoria asked me to tell the story. He lost his US passport, and there was an arrest warrant issued by Herbert Hoover because he was suspected of being a communist and a spy and sending secrets about American rocketry to the Russians. And I'll tell the story because Victoria started giggling. When he did his first exhibition in Paris in 1954 of electro paintings, obviously he had to put plugs all over the gallery so he could plug in his paintings. But there was a FBI Secret Service agent who came to the vernissage to drink the liquor, I guess. And the Secret Service wrote in his report to Herbert Hoover, the alleged artist Frank Malina. It was almost worse to be an alleged artist than an alleged communist. The alleged artist. And he was trying to figure out these paintings that you had to plug in, where was my father hiding the secrets? And he pointed out that the Museum of Art Moderne of the city of Paris bought one of these paintings in the 50s, and the city of Paris council was 50% Communist Party members at the time. And so he said, Frank's painting has been sold to the city of Paris. The communist members of the city of Paris are going to send it to Moscow. And he was convinced that this electro painting was really a device for sending secrets to the Russians. The alleged artist. And indeed, many of you that were working in the 50s and 60s were accused of being alleged artists. Oh, you're just gadgeteers, you're nerds. The fact that you create strong emotional and visceral experiences for people, oh, no, it's all technophilia, as I'll explain. But at the same time, Leonardo has embedded, and I'm glad you mentioned, no, I think it was Drew Hemmant, as we were drinking tea before, mentioned ethicists. From the beginning, Leonardo has been involved with people trying to figure out what was going on and help address the unintended consequences. And that included historians, humanist scholars, researchers, and some of the people that helped Leonardo survive when my dad died in '81 were Ernst Gombrich, Rudolf Arnheim, J.J. Gibson, and they said basically, keep it going. And then they stayed on the editorial board. They did a lot of peer reviewing for free because I'd never peer reviewed anything in my life. I was still a young scientist. And so this coupling also with the social embedding of what we do has always been part of what this village culture has been about. And I agree with you, unfortunately. The global village is fragile. McLuhan was full of shit. Well, boy, was he wrong. We are not living in a global village. I'll get more into that. Sorry for the technical language. And so what I like to say is we now use this metaphor of a network of villages. Leonardo is one of the small ones down there somewhere on the edge. Ars Electronica is probably one of the big blue ones. I mean, we do not attract 100,000 people to our events. And in a very real sense, it is a mutually supporting community of practice. I have written letters of recommendation for you when you apply for jobs, and you've written letters of recommendation for me when I apply for jobs. And as a result of being a small nonprofit, we just have just a habit of collaborating with other groups. And I've just named a few. Noema, obviously, recently and for a long time, Future Everything, Laser hosts who host these meetings all over the planet, and now the birthday parties that Nina has been. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm romanticizing my fear about the world today, but I trust you, and I hope we trust each other. And maybe McLuhan was a little bit right, that it is possible to build global villages, but not in the way that he thought. And so in a very real sense, I want to apologize. I was in Silicon Valley, Berkeley, in the 1970s and 80s and 90s when the internet was invented and we were going to connect everybody to everybody and the global village was really going to happen. Boy, were we wrong. The internet did not create a global village any more than television did. And so I apologize for our technophilia and our techno-optimism at the time. And it's frightening if you go back to look at what we wrote in 1985 or 1994. The internet was just gonna bring world peace. And I'm working in Texas right now, and we're as close to World War III as we've been anyway. So I hope we've learned some lessons about not being too techno-optimistic and technophilic. And one of the delights, I think, walking around Ars Electronica this year has been talking to the young people who are skeptical. You know, yes, they want to use the gadgets, but I've had some very interesting discussions with 19-year-olds who are questioning what they're doing, wondering, you know, do these brain monitors really have anything to do with what I'm thinking? And it's a refreshing walking around Ars Electronica this year. So as I said, we're now planning our 100th anniversary. In Mexico City, the Mexican Space Collective agreed to host our 100th party on the moon. But this triggered a little bit of a discussion. Obviously, I'm an astrophysicist and a space scientist, but to be honest, the moon is a really boring place. I'd rather come to Linz as a tourist than to the moon. The food's better here than on the moon. And Anik Bureau is smiling because we've been talking about, you know, the myth of the American frontier and what damage it did to human civilizations. And now the myth of space tourism. Maybe space tourism is not a good idea, especially to the moon, which is a really boring place. I'd rather go to Antarctica, where you can actually walk outside of the building and not have to stay inside of the building. Anyway, that's a much longer discussion. And so, where would you like to celebrate our 100th anniversary in 2068? So we have 50 years to work on it. Nina has promised to organize the 100th anniversary committee in 2068 also. We've been in touch with some of the cryogenic facilities in Texas that will freeze both Nina and my brain so that we can, well, by 2068, they'll be able to resuscitate frozen brains, right? I mean, yeah. And I'd rather do this 100th anniversary of Leonardo in a place that looks like that rather than the moon. So the Leonardo community of practice, it is slightly amazing. Over the 50 years, we've published the work of over 15,000 people in groups. That is a bigger creative community than lived in Florence and changed the history of ideas. But we're all over the place. We're not concentrated in one place like in Florence. And it's a very different situation, but it's a significant growing community of practice. Last year, we're now online. We have a Leonardo archive online. Last year, 400,000 PDFs were downloaded. That's not clicks, that's downloads. Now, I don't know if the people who downloaded the PDF read it, But they were interested enough that once they clicked, they wanted to download the article. 400,000 people. So like Ars Electronica, we're discovering that these villages are becoming small towns. Now, we don't want to become empires, so hopefully Ars Electronica will not grow any bigger, because otherwise you end up in other kinds of problems. And indeed, as we've discovered, ISEA was just held in South Africa this year. There's a vibrant community in the African continent that's part of this community practice. Ars has championed some of those people here in previous years. Every media, we still make the mistake of calling it digital media. My friend Wolf Reiner was asking me, what does that mean? Well, you walk around and it's biological media, and yes, somewhere under the table there's some electronics or something, but the media has nothing to do with the digital, it all has to do with the biological. And so every media, and I guess in McLuhan's sense, is fair game for sharing ideas, information, art. So I recommended a year ago, since we had no budget to celebrate our 50th anniversary, that we close down Leonardo. As I said, there's nothing worse than an institution, Xerox, do you still exist, that reinvents itself just to survive. I think IBM still exists, maybe, I don't know what they do. But there's nothing worse, in my mind, than an institution that changes what it does just so that it survives as an institution. So I recommended closing it down. Danielle said, no, I want to keep my job. Let's work on it and figure out what we should do instead of closing down. And as I said, the FBI thought my dad was an alleged artist. If you have to plug it in, it can't be art, according to the FBI of the time. You go around Postal City, and everything is plugged in. You may not know it. And so somehow the people in the 50s that started fighting the battles of using new media, new technologies in art have succeeded. There is now a very large creative community. When my father tried to start showing art in Paris in 1952, he was told, you're an American. Get out of here, go show in New York. We do the Paris School of Art. There's the London School and the New York School. We show the work of Parisian artists. And so the foreigners, who are the artists, refugees from the Second World War, many of them who'd taken refuge in Paris, were told, go away. This is not the way to show your work. If you go walk around Post City, there must be 200 languages being spoken in that room. Yes, there's a little bit of Australian German, but Filipino, I mean, it's amazing. So yes, we're part of a multilingual, multinational community. At the time, artists would say, and he took painting lessons, oh, you don't need art theory. It's a waste of time. It's just art theorists that read art theory. Artists don't need it. You go talk to the young people there, they read neuroscience as art theory. How does my brain work and how do I make better art? Computer science. They're all reading the theory of cybernetics to understand how you make symbiotic artworks, and obviously AI. The other thing, when they were working in the 50s, my dad was told, oh, artists are stupid. They just paint, they don't write. The art critics do the thinking and the writing. He really got mad. I'm not stupid. Yes, I'm an artist, but I'm a thinking human being, and I have things to say about what my art is for and about and how I made it. So artists now have their own websites all over the planet. If they want to write about what they're doing, they can. And so they're allowed to express themselves both through their art making and through other modes of talking about what they do. And it may be technical, it may be philosophical, it may be visionary, but they get to write on their website what is connected to their own art making. And finally, artists don't collaborate, they work solo. They go work in their studio. Artists who collaborate are just lazy. They need someone else to mix the paint for them. We live in a culture where the individual, and yes, I am talking about the US president, gets absurd amount of attention. And so I think over the next 50 years, I want to argue that the age of the individual genius is over. Yes, it would be nice to have 1 or 2 Leonardo da Vinci's, oh, maybe 20 of them. But what we really need, universities are really stupid also. They only award PhDs to individuals. All of those young people out there are collaborating on their artwork. And yet the university doesn't want to give them a PhD as a group. And so in the same way that we insisted to Gerfried that the Leonardo Award this year is a collective award, we live in a culture which I think is so mistaken about how to change the culture, and it's not more geniuses that we need. Yeah, okay, I'm happy to have a couple more. So maybe we are beginning, and in 2068, maybe this change will have happened. How do we work and train people who, as groups, behave like geniuses? And we don't know. We're all involved in transdisciplinary collaboration training, and boy, is it difficult. We can't even agree the scientific method is a good idea. So it is a very difficult period of transition where we still have the cult of the individual, but to change our culture, we need groups of people that behave with the kinds of things that we ascribe to individual geniuses. And a lot of you are geographic migrants, disciplinary migrants, part of diasporas. We need people that move around. I will not ask you how many different places you have all worked with during your career. Jeffrey Shore, I think, is still in Hong Kong. I'm not sure. No, he left. But we are a community that moves around to succeed, both in terms of disciplines, also in terms of geography, also in terms of institutions. So, hooray! Leonardo is dead. And by the way, he died 500 years ago on May 2nd. So we are talking about organizing some Leonardo wakes. Another excuse for having, I don't think you have cakes at a wake, do you, Danielle? But you can certainly drink, like at a birthday party. Yeah. And so long live the collaborative teams, Leonardo's. And so, in a very real sense, Gerfried, Hannes, Christine, when historians write the history books 100 years from now, somehow you redesign the arts of our time. And I want to make an apology to Christine because I accused her of being the grandmother of Ars Electronica. You were the mother of Ars Electronica, not the grandmother, Christine. And Hannes, you were the father of Ars Electronica. And just walking around Ars Electronica this year, we have succeeded in redesigning the arts. Now, the art market is catching up. There were gallery owners talking today about how you sell new media to collectors. But that's on the edge of the problem. The creative community is out there making trouble. Okay, so I'm now going to wrap up my sermon. My original degree is in physics, PhD in astrophysics. I'm an atheist. I'm a positivist. I think the world exists independent of my brain. But I grew up with a culture of scientists. Science, the endless frontier. There we go again with the American frontier myth. science did not win the peace. The Green Revolution didn't solve world hunger. The UN and the EU did not end war in Europe. Climate change is out of control. Science and technology are part of the problem. And so I believe very strongly that we need to step back, and my scientist colleagues don't like me to talk this way. I think science is in trouble. In 1945, Vannevar Bush, right after, at the time of the end of the Second World War, wrote Science, the Endless Frontier. There's the frontier myth again. New frontiers of the mind are before us, and if they are pioneered with the same vision, boldness, and drive with which we have waged this war, we can create a fuller and more fruitful employment and a fuller and more fruitful life. Just give us $1 billion. And science funding went up dramatically beginning in 1945, but the world is fragile in spite of the best science and technology that we could come up with. The war of cancer, did that war get won? I don't think so. War on drugs, no. It's not a technical problem. And the Anthropocene is not a war. It's a cybernetic complex system collapse, and we don't have the science to actually understand how to keep a system from collapsing. So I think we need to redesign science and engineering. We need to redesign the scientific methods themselves. My scientific colleagues say, that's fine. We know, scientific method is just fine. We just need more money. The sciences of complexity have changed our understanding of so much of how things operate in our world. Scientists, and they don't like to tell you, use computer simulations as hypotheses. You simulate the world, and if the simulation looks like the world, you get a Nobel Prize. Newton would not have recognized that scientific method. We have new concepts of causality, and I've been discussing with a lot of people that scientists love the reductive method until you get to the point where A causes B. I'm sorry, you cannot write an equation of climate change. That very notion of an equation of climate change just isn't coherent with the phenomenon of climate change and the Anthropocene and collapse of ecology. Next, and many of the people out there are using AI and big data to make artworks. The historian of science, and I've just lost his name, called this an epistemological inversion. There used to be so little data that scientists would spend all their life getting enough data to prove their idea. Now we have databases, and the secret of science funding agencies, we don't have time to analyze all that data. We just want to keep taking it because we'll figure out what's going on. And we now have instruments that can study our own minds, just the beginning. Maybe 50 years from now, they'll be more successful. The artist Stellark taught me a very humiliating lesson when he was building his third robotic arm, and he had 3 hands, you probably remember. And he said, I can no longer say on the one hand this, on the other hand that, because my middle hand says, hold on a second, what about me? We have left wing, right wing. We are biased because we are symmetrical animals. And that was basically Stellark's point. And there are now physicists saying, why do scientists search for symmetry in the universe? If we were asymmetrical animals, symmetry would have no interest. We have an implicit bias as humans to look for things that are symmetrical. Go talk to a tree. They're not symmetrical. We do trim them to shape them to be symmetrical, and Christmas trees are good because they're symmetrical, but trees are not inherently symmetrical. And of course, now in the last 5 years, AI software is finding patterns in data better than human beings can find patterns in human data. And we don't know what's going to happen to that. If you read the science literature now, discoveries have been made where the scientists cannot explain how the discovery was made because the AI software made the discovery, and the AI software doesn't tell you what it tried before it found the pattern. I can tell you, if you were Isaac Newton, your eyes would glaze up. What do you mean? You can't explain that you took a prism and put sunlight in it, and then that's what happened, and I discovered sunlight had all these colors in it? We now have AI software making scientific discoveries that humans cannot explain how the discovery was made. And then, and I apologize to my scientific colleagues, we need to redesign the social embedding of science. Helga Novotny, who was the president of the European Research Council for a while, called for socially robust science. What do you mean science isn't socially robust, the scientists say? We set our priorities all by ourselves. We don't need the public involved in setting scientific priorities. Helga said, hold on a second. We need to redesign the PhD. We're all struggling with the PhD in art and design. The PhD was invented, I think, in the 19th century. A PhD, a document used to be like 20 pages. If you go back to Harvard archives in 1906, now we make people write these as if more words is better. And I'm teaching PhD students. So I have a recommendation to the Minister of Education and Science of Austria. Unfortunately, he left yesterday, right after he gave his speech. So I was not able to give him the recommendation. He gave his speech and then ran out of the room. Oh, I didn't say that. Oh, are you recording this? Okay, Google, turn off the mics. So I think we need to redesign science itself. Artist-in-residence programs are wonderful, but I think every scientific team should hire artists, designers, and humanities scholars. And let me tell you, out there in Ars Electronica, there are young people that I would hire in any scientific team right now if I had the budgets of science. And before the invention of photography, yeah, didn't Darwin have an artist on the boat? Humboldt had a group of artists that went exploring with him. Before photography, the scientists called on experts in representing things as part of their scientific expeditions. So, Minister of Science of Austria, maybe 25% of your budget should fund artists, designers, and humanists in scientific research teams. Very modest request. And as I like to say, Humboldt, when he explored South America, it was a strange world, the new world. But let me tell you, data worlds are even stranger. Data worlds have 60 dimensions, 600 dimensions. At least South America had 3. And Humboldt could go there and make sense of it. You go into these big databases, scientists are the last people I'd ask to make sense of what's in that data, because they're trying to impose on the big data prejudices that they have acquired in this world. Secondly, I think, dear Minister of Science and Education of Austria, you should fund professional amateurs who are outside of universities and research labs. If you happen to remember, in the 19th century, a lot of amateurs actually made amazing discoveries. They happened to be aristocrats, so they were paid not by the Minister of Science, but by someone else. And the current structures we have are a pure accident of World War II. If World War II hadn't been won because physicists built the atom bomb and radar and so on, we wouldn't have the science institutions we have today. It's not a logical structure. It's an accident of history that World War II was won because the Allies were a little bit better at high technology for fighting the war than the other side. So finally, not only was McLuhan wrong, but C.P. Snow was wrong. This whole idea of two cultures is part of the implicit bias we have because we're symmetric. Oh, there are two cultures. What about the third culture? No, there are many cultures. There are many ways of knowing, and C.P. Snow put this very negative, destructive idea that there's art and science. No, there are many ways of knowing. Some of them lean more on certain techniques, others on other techniques. Artists are trying to make sense of the world just as scientists are. And so somehow we have to move from the tree of knowledge to the ecology of knowledge. I'm sorry. And when I was in Colombia, I found these two paintings by Botero, The Tree of Knowledge and The Ecology of Knowledge. Now, he didn't call it that, but let me tell you, C.P. Snow did us this favor with this false metaphor of art versus science. Finally, to finish, Leonardo was created in 1968 when academic publishing started being commercialized. My father-in-law at the time was one of the pioneers of commercial academic publishing. Let me tell you, today, all of you self-publish. Do you really need a publisher? Just go publish it on your website or on one of the other places. Intelligent people will find what you do. So, yes, I think we should close down Leonardo for our 50th anniversary, but unfortunately, we're making a profit at the moment. And so we just started an experimental platform called Arteca. One of the biases of Leonardo is we publish only in English. I hate to tell you, but I don't have to tell you. Most people on this planet do not speak English, and they have good ideas too. So we have now created this Arteca platform. We published our first project in Mandarin. We have a second one going up. We have a podcast platform that is now published in 14 different languages. We want to publish in the language the creative people think in. I don't want to get into a complicated discussion of how language and thought, anyway, the semioticians here will have a field day. All 50 years of Leonardo are there. All 30 years of the Computer Music Journal are there. There are about 500 ebooks. We've made this a gated commons because of the tragedy of the internet. If you have ever published in a Leonardo publication of any type, we will give you free access. If you've served for free on an editorial board, we will give you free access. If you invested your weekend peer reviewing an article, we will give you free access. We're working with MIT Press to figure out how we keep making a profit. But if any of you in this audience would like free access to Arteca, drop us an email. So Arteca is where the hybrids, amphibians, and extremophiles will breed. It will not be artists and scientists. It will be, I don't know what. In the last 5 years, I've been talking about the need for intellectual dating services. What is a village? It's an intellectual dating service. The shoesmith meets the ironmonger, and the two people discuss how you make things using leather. I think it was in Colombia earlier this year, a young Canadian student coined the word Grindr. So for those of you that use Grindr or Tinder, you know what that student was talking about. And so the idea is that somehow we build ways where people with ideas can find each other. in the tragedy of the internet, where 90% of what you read online is now fake. So how over the next 50 years do we rebuild the idea of publishing so that you can trust what you read at some level? I mean, it may still be wrong, but so these are the kind of people that we would like to come to our 100th birthday party. And yes, these two kinds of people can collaborate because they both eat. And they don't eat each other, but they will, the bird will go on the elephant to avoid flying and go eat where the elephant eats. So we're going to finish here, and I think the plan is, what is the plan now? Hannes, what do you want to do? Do you want to do the party beginning here, or do you want to go into the other room? Amico. So we've asked a few people that have been important to the survival of these two small nonprofits just to say a few words. But the hope is that when we go to the birthday party, we can continue doing that. So what do you want to do? Should we, Hannes and Christine, you want to talk right now here and then we can move, or?
That would be actually the plan.
Yeah.
To have a few of these birthday statements.
So maybe Herbert and
we have wonderful
Suzanne.
guests, Herbert V. Franke.
So maybe you could come up and just
please join us.
Tell us what's on your mind and where you would like to celebrate the 100th anniversary. Gerfried, will you moderate? Yes.
Wir bitten Sie alle, ein Statement für Leonardo abzugeben. Der Wunsch von Roger wäre eine gute Idee für die 100-Jahr-Geburtstagsfeier. Aber wie es mit Geburtstagsständchen ist, es ist natürlich völlig euch überlassen, wie ihr Leonardo zum Geburtstag gratulieren wollt. Wir haben hier 3 Mikrofone, wer lieber am Pult das machen will. Wir haben hier keine formalen Verpflichtungen, wie wir das abwickeln. Und ich glaube, es gibt auch eine Videobotschaft, ein Videogeburtstagsständchen, das wir dann auch einspielen wollen. Und ich würde natürlich gerne bitten, Herbert W. Franke, den dienstältesten Pionier sozusagen in unserer Runde, mit einem kleinen Geburtstagswunsch oder Statement für Leonardo zu beginnen.
Meine Damen und Herren, liebe Kollegen und Freunde, ich bin gelegentlich zu meiner Verwunderung als Künstler schon bezeichnet worden, was bin ich ja nicht, aber ich bin auf keinen Fall ein Sprachkünstler. Und so muss ich Sie bitten, Verständnis dafür zu haben, dass ich mich in Deutsch ausdrücke, aber meine Frau wird so nett sein und das, was ich gesagt habe, ins Englische übertragen. Das, was
may I just say that, because we are starting with a problem now. Herbert just told that he is an artist. Definitely he is not, sorry. He said he is not an artist, definitely. Also he was called an artist, but he is for sure not an artist by talking in foreign languages. I'm not quite sure which was the expression in English he mentioned. So he will do it in German, and I am the wife of Herbert, and I'm trying my best to translate all the subjects he is saying into English. So.
Mein Leben war schon oft durch Zufälle beeinflusst, und ein Zufall hat mich in Verbindung mit all dem gebracht, was im Begriff Leonardo verborgen steht.
So life is always incidents, a lot of incidents, and also it was an incident that brought me into the scenario of Leonardo.
Ich gehe jetzt zurück in die 70er Jahre.
60er sind das schon. Egal.
Also einen Kalender habe ich jetzt nicht bei mir. Wir können das verlosen vielleicht. Aber was ich meine, kannst du ja noch gar nicht wissen.
Ach so.
Ich meinte, dass in dieser Zeit in Paris einige sehr interessante Aktivitäten zu verzeichnen waren. Ich bin da einige Male hingefahren und habe mich mit den Franzosen zu verständigen versucht, was nicht so gut ging. Ich habe aber eine Entdeckung gemacht, eine Bekanntschaft, die außerordentlich wichtig für mich war. Ich habe nämlich Frank Malina kennengelernt.
So Herbert went to Paris and to France several times in the 60s, be sure. And he met a lot of artists there where he had problems to talk to them and to understand them because of his language problems, foreign language. But he met one person who was very important for him, and he also thought he is very important in general. This was your father, Frank Malina.
Sie werden ja wissen, dass Frank Malina eigentlich ein Techniker, ein Ingenieur war und zur Kunst dann gekommen ist, auf Wegen, die ich nicht genau kenne, aber sich begeistert hat und insbesondere auch den Wunsch geäußert hat, dass einander Kunst und Wissenschaft und auch Technik näher kommen sollten.
So your father was a scientist at the beginning, but he also came into the art field. Herbert is not quite sure how he got there, and as far as I understood, you didn't tell a lot about that subject today as well. But in any case, he was very important for the bridge between science and art.
Wir haben uns, wie gesagt, begegnet. Ich bin auch eingeladen worden von ihm. Wir konnten uns unterhalten und wir haben eben festgestellt, dass diese Möglichkeit, die ein Wissenschaftler automatisch aufzuweisen hat, nämlich etwas zu gestalten, etwas zu erfinden, nicht nur in der Wissenschaft nutzvoll sein kann, sondern auch in einem ganz anderen Gebiet, nämlich im Gebiet der Kunst.
So they came together, they talked a lot about the subject and that a scientist is able to invent things that can also be used in the field of arts.
Und das war ein wichtiger Versuch auch für Frank, sich dafür einzusetzen, dass Künstler etwas mehr Interesse für Wissenschaft bekommen sollten und Technik und dass auf der anderen Seite die Wissenschaftler und die Techniker sich etwas mehr für die Kunst interessieren sollten. Das würde für beide Seiten nützlich sein.
So a big stimulus for Frank was to bring science closer to artists and that artists understand better the world of science on one side, but also that scientists get involved into the artistic creative process and understand better the thinking of artists as well.
Und damit kommen wir eigentlich zum Anlass, der uns hier zusammengeführt hat. Frank Malina ist nämlich auf die Idee gekommen, diese Möglichkeiten, die sich hier bieten, etwas genauer zu verstehen, verständlich zu machen. Und er hat damit Leonardo erfunden.
So one aspect was that Frank tried to open Leonardo, that artists can write about their works to make understandable what they are thinking, how they are working, what is behind the artwork they are doing.
Und bei den wenigen Besuchen, die ich in Paris machte, habe ich doch immer wieder Zeit gefunden, mit ihm über dieses Problem zu sprechen. Und wir haben verschiedene Ideen ausgetauscht. Dann bin ich natürlich bald wieder nach Hause gefahren und dann hielt ich eines Tages das erste Heft von Leonardo in der Hand.
So they talked quite often, several times they met and discussed that thing, and it was, I think, 68 where the first issue of Leonardo came to Herbert's home in Puppling. and he could hold in hands the first issue of Leonardo.
Und hier brauche ich nicht so ausführlich zu sein, denn das wissen Sie sowieso. Diese Zeitschrift hat einige wichtige Aufgaben und da ist genau das, was ich vorher angedeutet habe, nämlich diese Annäherung von Wissenschaft und Kunst und Technik. Das sollte etwas weiter verbreitet sein, es sollte in weitere Teile der Welt kommen und die Künstler sollten selbst beschreiben, welche Möglichkeiten sie sehen und ebenso sollten sich Wissenschaftler und Techniker zu Wort melden, um ihre Gedanken zum Besten zu geben, etwa darüber zu berichten, wie sie diese Meinung, die Frank Malina hier kundgetan hat, wie sie die am besten in die Praxis umsetzen könnten.
So I will do that a bit free, but I think it is the CP Snow world of the two worlds that come together in some way, even there are many of them, but to bridge them and bring them together, this was the idea behind Leonardo, and it's now 50 years that it is working, and we are still hoping for the next 50 years, of course, and the 100 years birthday party. We hope to be invited to that as well. So.
Nun, es ist, ja, im Prinzip ist nun eigentlich der Weg bereitet und ich brauche hier nicht mehr ausführlich zu sein. Sie wissen, dass Leonardo ein Erfolgsprojekt war. Ein ganz unwahrscheinliches, das konnte man nämlich eigentlich nicht von vornherein wissen, dass Leonardo diese Anerkennung und diese Verbreitung findet, wie sie gefunden hat. Und hier muss ich natürlich den Nachfolger von Frank Malina, seinen Sohn Roger, benennen, der die Aufgaben des Vaters dann übernommen hat und etwas geleistet hat, was manche vielleicht als eine großartige Leistung nehmen würde, das er in der Kunst nie bereiten konnte. Es ist ihm nämlich gelungen, diese Zeitschrift über Jahre hinweg lebendig zu erhalten, 50 Jahre, wie wir jetzt alle wissen, und ich möchte ihm zu dieser Leistung gratulieren.
So it is 50 years and it was the beginning of your father, but Roger did that proceed this work into the future and also reinvented Leonardo step by step and brought it into our new world. And so Herbert wants to thank you for your work and your ambitious and very, well, how should I say, yeah, ambitious work. Fighting for that idea.
Ich glaube, dass gerade in den nächsten paar Jahren es sehr wichtig sein wird, dass Roger sich hier noch einmal einsetzt, denn es steht uns einiges bevor, eine Digitalisierung, die auch die Zeitschriften erfassen wird. Und ich bin nicht ganz sicher, ob es auf Papier gedruckte Zeitschriften in 10 Jahren überhaupt noch geben wird. Mit diesem Problem müssen wir fertig werden.
So Herbert says he thinks that printed paper will come out of mode. So Leonardo's future will be somehow in the digital world, and it will be your task for the next 10 years to come there. And all of the community, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Herbert Franke, for your report from this common history. And according to age, the next one is Hannes Leopold-Zeder, because he's a few months older than you. So we do it strictly after age. Please now, Hannes, the founder of Ars Electronica.
Honorable Professor Malina, dearest Roger, it is not easy to say some words because nearly all is said. Gerfried did it wonderful and Herbert Franke did the whole beginning, how it started, how the work really began. But you are the most newest part of Leonardo. First of all, now today we are all here and we congratulate you on your anniversary of Leonardo. We do hope that this day might be very, very special to you. Next year is also a special milestone for us. As Ars Electronica, as you know, will celebrate the 40 years in 2019. And however, with its impressive tradition over 50 years, half a century, you are ahead of 11 years of Ars Electronica. So Leonardo can look back very proudly, as we heard it, on a remarkable achievement. In the first issue of Leonardo in January 1968, the legendary Frank Malina writes in the introduction to his new magazine, "It is primarily intended to be a channel of communication between artists." Very 50 years ago, it is a sentence which really we'll have to keep in mind. However, he also adds that the journal will also write about new materials, about scientific techniques that might be useful for artists. Today, Leonardo presents itself as a project of Leonardo, the International Society for Arts, the Scientists and Technology. Dearest Roger, you grew up with Leonardo. One can say this. First, you were maybe a little critical as a young guy, maybe or not. But then in 1982, you took over the full responsibility and the executive editor of Leonardo at MIT Press, a position you maintain today with the great tradition of its original spirit. And the original spirit is a main point, the original spirit of the beginning. Moreover, the scholarly print journal Leonardo of 1978 has mutated in your time into the Leonardo network. We heard from him, now it is worldwide, from the past 50 years, becoming a global organizational network with a variety of scholarly publications, workshops, prizes, projects in various formats. Ars Electronica also tried to do a similar thing. We also have Gerfried Stocker made many, many formats, and so we are in a similar situation. Leonardo articulates well and always the important role of artists and scientists in our society. This is very, very important. In short, one can say that there is hardly a field of art and science where Leonardo is not in some way involved with ideas, with initiatives or projects. Leonardo today is a global medium of innovation and creativity in art, science at an extremely high level. A magical star to which we are all very thankful. I wish you and Leonardo, the whole Leonardo team, the very best for the 50s.
Richard, you cannot avoid. Please, now it's your turn.
great audience, ceremony audience. It's an honor to all of us to celebrate an organization as well as a person who both are a legend, as we heard. As Roger told us, the next party will start in Mexico in 50 years. And I was asked, or he asked us, what could be a present for you? So it was a takeover. I wasn't prepared for that. So I had a chance to sit next to you and rethink and remodel my thoughts. And I thought, remember yesterday your survival speech. And it's great to see that on a level which is uncommercial. It's a non-profit survival. So to say, I want to make a connection to the people you need. Those people you need are the artists who struggle for survival, those artists who are not in the market. So those artists dependent on a new strategy, and this strategy you are putting forward. So on the other hand, to make sure your survival, you have to take care for those artists who try to survive on a non-profit level, which is going more and more difficult. And rethinking the ideas you just stated precisely today, I think one item you missed, sorry to say that, and this is, in my opinion, a very, very important point of view which is in your business. It is very contemporary, very important, because all of this technological advancement and technological fetishism, scientific fetishism, I believe one of the main items in your magazine or your art approach is the humanizing of technology. This doesn't happen in the normal magazines, so it's an important part if we want to get in a greater future which doesn't look like that. So let me go back 45 years. I ended my studies at the Academy of Visual Arts in Vienna. I thought what I should do now to get along with the arts, I have to forget everything I've learned. But what should I do then? And I had a friend, he is at that time an underestimated artist. His name, Mark Adrian, you know. And Mark brought me in his studio and said, Richard, I have a magazine, look at that. It was the first time I've seen Leonardo. So I thought, when I got through that, that might be really interesting because it's just that which did not relate to the arts. It was beyond the arts. So I thought that's the way how to experiment with the brain of what art could be or art could be developed. To the good or to the bad, this incident was important to my career as an artist, going beyond the art theories, going into a stuff which I never, ever would have gone into, going beyond this three-dimensional space here, going in the outer space. So to do that was an approach which I are indebted to Leonardo, that's for true. But on the other hand, I had the chance, because of going through that, to be the very first artist to do an interactive artwork with the space station Mir, as you know. And this experiment was, to me, so impressive that it still reminded me on how I got into this tech way of thinking and dealing with art. So, to Leonardo and Roger, thank you so much. And in order to remember, I would like to give you this book. It's called Arza. And this book is all the experiments with the Russians.
Thank you, Richard. We have one more message from the old generation, sorry to say it like this, and then a message from the young generation. And afterwards, we have to evacuate this space because we have to prepare for the birthday concert at 10 o'clock when Iwata is doing his performance. So all the other people that are here, the pioneers that we asked already, the pioneers that I'm very happy to see here, like Alex Adriansen also, please join us downstairs and please prepare already your birthday wishes downstairs because we will definitely come and ask you as well. But here we have now a message from somebody you declared dead yesterday, and to prove that he's alive, we have a video.
So Roy, I'm
initially it of course would have attracted artists who were very, very clearly interested in technology and science, in mathematics, and as it was beginning to emerge, the computer and so forth. More and more, I think it was not simply that, but artists who felt they had something very precise to set out in text that could make reference textually, as it were, intellectually to other kinds of artists. So this sort of bridging, which the scholarly form of, notes and references and so on allowed for a sort of knitting to take place of ideas. And so that's the great value of the archives of Leonardo, of course, that you can move between fields and ideas because of the precision that's demanded by the editorial from the days of Frank alone right the way through. You don't just throw ideas out, you don't just say that kind of book, it's this precise, and that allows for a kind of web of connections of ideas which can be very, very important. Well, now of course it faces a future, as Roger has said and as very well aware, that as print somewhat recedes and these new networking things take over even more, does this, what I would have called the initial metaphor of networks through reference, through text that was built up by Leonardo and its archive of journals and so forth, that even more becomes important and I think will lead to new kinds of practice That's my thought. I mean, there's a big job to be done, and Roger knows it, and he's acquiring a great team to deal with that. What it means to be online, as it were, to be connected in that way. So I'm very, very optimistic. Why not, of course, but very optimistic that they will find a new form that will be suited to combine this rigor of thinking, or this invitation, really, that's the importance of it, the invitation to the artist to think deeply about their work, deeply about the works of others, how they connect, and so forth. So, yes, it's 50 years, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing to celebrate. It is absolutely numero uno in the field, and particularly as everyone's now madly doing PhDs, and if they're in Leonardo, then they've really sort of found the right space for their work at high level of achievement. So it's a wonderful moment for them. I'm happy. I'm on the advisory board, and I'm very happy and honored to be connected in that way. And I've got a few articles there myself, going back many decades actually, but I'm very happy about that as well. Yeah.
So this was recorded just a few weeks ago, so 2 weeks ago, so he's definitely alive, I can assure. And, and now I would like to ask Christa Sommerer, so to say, to represent the people who have to take care of the 100 years birthday, please.
So I'm very happy to represent the next generation here. Thanks very much, and congratulations, Roger, and also thanks so much for hosting the students in your home in Paris. Don Fellner and Belle Olson was there and looking in your archives and found a lot of material. Actually, please come later and see some of these materials. And the students invented a new format called the Leonardo Slam, which takes place tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And the whole idea here is to have a playful approach dealing with the archive, but also showing their own ideas, and maybe a less academic way of dealing with Leonardo achievement and injecting new ideas from the young generation. There's also Kenneth Azurin here. He will do a Leonardo podcast, so please, anybody who has anything to say about Leonardo, please talk to Ken. He's very happy to take your input. And we are congratulating you, and we are very happy to be able here to bring in the young generation from the Art University in Linz. Thank you.
I would like to encourage everybody here to attend the Leonardo Slam tomorrow. It happens also on Monday, but also an emphasis on people who have direct experience with the Leonardo community, because this is a way to you know, as Roy Ascott said earlier, to weave a kind of new web of ideas made out of the silk of Leonardo. And so, to borrow the phrase that I learned from Roger, to come at new ideas or old ideas, but come at them sideways. So please come. Oh, there's free beer.
Thanks so far for all the birthday wishes. As I said, we have now to move downstairs into the exhibition. Nina will show us a little bit what she put together to represent this wonderful history. And at 10 o'clock there will be here again Ayvada's concert, also part of the celebrations. And before Roger goes away, without any further ado, I also have to congratulate
please follow the info trainers. The birthday party location is downstairs, first floor, the exhibition of the Leonardo. There's a next room, and there's the birthday party place. Please come.